Aloha, beautiful souls. Welcome to A Better World with Adrienne. I am so grateful and excited to welcome you to this space, this episode, because it is a co-creation, weaving the golden threads with my beautiful sister, Rakai'el Webb. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me to share with your community, Adrienne. And thank you so much to everyone who is listening. We hope that this conversation is inspiring and empowering and supportive for you.
Yes, all of these things. And I'm so excited to have you. And one of the things, there's so many reasons why I invited you on this podcast. The first thing is every single podcast, I set an altar. And that is something that I learned from you years ago. So for everyone listening, I met Rakai'el in the online space back in 2020. We're both learning and expanding, how we're going to share our gifts with the world. And she dropped the word Lumeria in the chat of one of these calls, and everything in my body, I was like, what's that? And then ever since then, I've been in her world just learning about the mermaid I've always been and the stars and the altars. So let us call upon the altar. The altar is thank you in advance to Spirit. It is setting the stage. It is reverence. Is when we make a beautiful place for things to land. That's when they do.
So beautiful.
So we have sunflowers on the altar representing Leo energy and the solar codes. Rakai'el is a Leo moon. I'm a Leo sun. I have my Nana, one of my deepest guides, her vase, which is shaped in a mermaid fin. I have rose petals representing unconditional love. And I have blue chalcedony, which is very connected to the third eye to me, intuition. And both Rakai'el and I have our ajnas defined. It represents compassion and generosity. So thank you, thank you, thank you to all of these energies and the beauty in this space. And the last piece of the altar is the element of air. We always take 3 deep breaths together, connecting our minds, bodies, and spirits, because this is a podcast and it's a transmission. So wherever you're tuning in from, whether you're in your car, on a walk, feel the earth beneath you. And if you are able, close your eyes. Inhale through your nose. Exhale out the mouth. Letting go of everything leading up to this moment. Fully entering this connection point to yourself. Inhale through the nose. Feel your third eye open, your ears open to new insights, new rememberings. Exhale out the mouth. One last inhale through the nose. Hold it at the top. Allow yourself to be suspended in time, setting an intention for our time together. Keep holding because you can. Exhale out the mouth. Feeling this divine connection between you, me, all of us. Gently blink open your eyes. The portal has been opened.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you for teaching me about altars.
It's one of my favorite technologies. Yeah.
And
I
it's
had
so simple.
I had a vision one time, or an awareness that it was that our altar is kind of like the mission control board for our spaceship, and that is what is kind of setting the navigation. It's kind of like the navigation controls for where we're moving, how we're navigating in our lives in the world.
It's so true. And that's so Atlantean of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, like if you choose the buttons, then those are the ones you get to push, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to open this conversation with, I mean, there's so much I would love to speak on because I really wanted to invite you because, first of all, you've been a consistent presence of expansion, inspiration, just I think I've turned a dial as far as it can go, right? And then you'll do something and it's like a whole new dial. It's like a Technicolor dial. And I'm like, "Okay, you just have a very unique way of seeing things and synthesizing things, which is a key word for you these days." So, I would love to really where do I want to start? If you can tell us about the three-way mirror and what that means to you, and why it matters.
In relationship to the three systems of astrology, human design, and the gene keys.
Yeah. I like how you call it the three-way mirror.
Totally, totally. Leave it up to, for both of us, we share the channel of structuring. And so this is the channel of the freak to genius. And so you never know what kind of freaky things is going to come out.
Of the mirror or us?
Well, both, actually. Um, so the three-way mirror, so for me, I feel like my first esoteric language is astrology. I found an astrology book inside my parents' closet when I was 17, started learning how to draw astrological charts. I don't even know how I did that. And and so I've been, always fascinated with the stars. When I was 14, I was in a wilderness program for girls coming of age, and it was combined with Native American spirituality. And so there was a naming ceremony, and my name was Starfish, because I was always talking about the stars, and I was a really good swimmer. Um, so, always had, and that was when I was 14, and then I found out about astrology when I was 17. Um, and yeah, so I've been, swimming in the stars, studying astrology for 25 years now. And then it was like, um, I, when I learned about human design from my mom, because she was getting really into it in around 2012. And prior to that, in 2005, I was mentoring with this acupuncturist and an aromatherapist in Louisville, Kentucky, and they were working with the Chinese I Ching. And so I was throwing hexagrams and creating hexagrams and consulting the sage and reading the hexagrams in terms of like life guidance since around that time, 2005. And then in 2012, she comes in with human design and she's like, "Oh, we're projectors," because she's a projector too. And she was like, "Oh, we have to wait for the invitation." And I was like, that's funny. I was like, I get my invitations from the universe. I don't have to wait for anybody. It was like, that's not, I'm not going to sit on my hands. That does not feel very empowering.
Mhm.
Um, and so around that same time, I was also introduced to Adam Apollo, who's super into the gene keys. And so I went down the gene keys path instead of going down human design path, not even knowing that gene keys came out of human design. Um, but then I knew about human design. I knew about it then, but then I started having it come more into my field around 2015 when I went to Burning Man with Erin Claire Jones. And so I was friends with her and so I'm still friends with her. And so watching her going into human design and then watching her career over the years just expand and blossom in so many beautiful ways. And I actually had a reading with her, and she has the same 2343.
Oh.
And um, and so the way that she explained the invitation for projectors is that, it's more of a safety mechanism for us. Or a protection, because we have such, I'm speaking we because you're also projector, um, because because our aura is so deeply penetrating, when we're around people, that, and we can see, we're designed to be able to quantify energy. And so we can see how and where energy is being inefficiently used. And so, that's why projectors are guides, but it's also why we have to wait for the invitation, because if you see how someone's using their energy inefficiently and you're like, "Hey, by the way," and they're like, you know,
Yeah, just from my personal experience, it doesn't go over well. It
yeah,
doesn't.
right. They're like, nobody asked you. Or like, okay, thanks, and then you end up feeling bitter and resentful because you tried to offer them guidance. You can see how it's not working efficiently, and then they're ignoring you or doing whatever they want. You're like, so, um, so the way Aaron explained that to me was that, it's actually this like protective, the invitation is this protective measure that really ensures that, when a projector is truly invited to share their insights, to share their wisdom, to share what they see and to offer guidance in the way that they're uniquely designed, that they can experience their signature of success.
Mhm.
Um, and so I was like, okay, well, I can get down with that. Like, and so I intellectually started studying human design. It was like I've had many, many readings since then, and had a reading done for my entire team to see how we work together and everything. And but I wasn't really living it.
Mhm.
There's a huge, you and I talked about this, is that there's a huge difference between studying something intellectually, and projectors are extraordinarily intellectual beings, and then actually beginning to make changes in your life, and to have to do the hard work of you know, looking and seeing where you've been your not self and having to make really radical transformations and changes in your life. And sometimes that involves relationships ending or ways of doing business that have made you a lot of money
Mhm.
ending. tearing down the structures that you built in your business from your not self. Um, and so that all happened for me. Really, it kind of got smacked in the face with it in it was really in 2022, but what happened is that I experienced an extraordinary burnout at the end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021. Um, and then I found out, I was reading a human design book later, and I found out that many projectors experience burnout around 40. And that was my 40th birthday. And so I was like, oh, wow. Like I thought it was because my dog died. But that I just felt lack of energy and I was just struggling and just kind of limping along in my business. Um, and, uh, and there was just a whole lot of like fallout that happened, like a lot. It was just like things just started crumbling because I didn't have the energy because I don't have the energy to continue pretending I was a manifesting generator. So, long story, but to come around, um, so really started, I got COVID in 2022 and was like, wow, this huge health wake up call. And then started really going deeper and deeper into human design when I found out that, oh, that is maybe what happened to me, that like this is why I've been feeling like crap for a year and a half. Was because I actually had a burnout around the time that I'm 40 because I'm a projector. It's not to say that you can't have burnouts before you're 40 or after you're 40. I mean, like, you're not self can, swipe you under the, pull you down into the swamp of lethargy and, bitterness at any point. But so then I started studying with Amy Lee, and I took a course with her called the Projector Way. And it was like my first time being in a class only for projectors, studying human design. And I was like, oh my God, this is really, really helpful. And it was like, so many things just started revealing themselves to me. Um, and so, coming from this historical background of astrology first and foremost, and then the gene keys that was backed, by my studies doing the I Ching, and then now coming to human design after resisting it for so long. When I really started getting into the mechanics of human design, I was like, oh my goodness, like this is because astrology is wonderful and lovely, and the gene keys too, it's like but human design is really like the hands-on in your life, practical day-to-day guidance for how to actually apply those things that you have learned from astrology and from the gene keys. Because it's like me even being an astrologer, it's like someone's like, well, what does this mean in my chart? And it's like, well, it could manifest, you could be a Pisces rising or have Neptune on your ascendant, and you could be a like, a spiritual person, with visions in your meditations and things like that, or you can be a drug addict, it
Oh, and I've been both. I mean, and I don't even have any planets in Pisces. Can you imagine? But I feel let's you know, there's two sides of everything, you know, and we're always towing that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then when it was like, I felt like I was like, wow, because, human design is based in astrology and the I Ching and the Kabbalah, which I also have studied for a long time and, did a whole immersion, apprenticeship training with my teacher, Isis Indria. And so it was this beautiful synthesis of, so many of these things that I have gone very deep in over time. And so in the three-way mirror, right? I feel like that to use to not, because it's like, the zero sum game would say that you have to pick one, right? Because if you think that one is more helpful than the other, then that negates the help of the other. It's like, no. And so I feel like that astrology is like, looking in a mirror. When you're looking at your astrology chart, you're looking at a reflection of your psyche. And the same thing for the gene keys. This is a reflection of different aspects of your psychological makeup. And then when you add human design also, right? You're looking at this, and human design is actually two charts, right? It's like two astrological charts that are combined, and there's all this other stuff woven into it. But it's that, when you have these different mirrors that, these systems that you've been using to be able to see yourself more, or to be able to see other people and understand how this reality works, and then you bring those mirrors all next to each other, and then you make this three-way mirror, right? It's like when you have a three-way mirror, you can look and you can see different angles of yourself that you could not see with just one mirror or even two mirrors. It's like, so I really love that the synergy and the synthesis of astrology, human design, and the gene keys all woven together.
Yeah. Well, and it's why we don't stay in the dressing room when we're trying on clothes. We walk out and we go to the big ass three-way mirror because we want to see, okay, how's the back of my hair? How does my butt look? Most importantly, like we want to see all of it. So I just love that. The first time I heard you express it that way, I was like, that is amazing. Like that's exactly I don't love using the word need because I think it's overused. I think people use it a lot when it's not even true. Um, if you want a holistic, like self-study, if you want to fully know yourself, you do need the different angles. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. And also too, right, that it's like to, because that's part of the illusion, and it's really part of the illusion for projectors, is that we can know ourselves, right? That it's like, like I love how Ra says, he's like, you talk about the Temple of Delphi, and it says, know thyself. And he says there used to be another part of the sign that fell off, and it said generators only.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I have to voice a hummingbird just went by, and I've been seeing hummingbirds. Like I've been asking specifically because I started seeing them, like, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I see a pattern there. And I said, okay, I like making codes with the force, source. I'm like, send me a hummingbird when I'm doing the correct thing. And I started just like, so as we're having this conversation, this hummingbird goes by. I'm like, woohoo! Um, but so for people listening, I would say that my community is a lot of spiritual people here that know they're here to contribute to making a better world. Like they're on their path of becoming themselves. And that part of that is self-study, seeing yourself, like self-actualizing in this lifetime. A lot of people are like, maybe later. We want to do it this time because it's important. Um, I would say it's more of a beginner audience in human design. I would consider myself a beginner. Like someone asked me if I could do a reading for them. I said, I can look at your chart and like say stuff. I would never charge money for a reading though. I'm not an expert. Um, and so when Rakai'el says Ra is the person who channeled the human design system. And he basically just like it was a series of days, right? Where it all came to him in a tree.
Hmm. Would you like for me to tell the story?
Yeah, tell the story.
Um, so also if you're actually interested and you want to hear, I think it's really good to hear him tell it because it's his story.
Mhm.
So if you go to YouTube and you search The Encounter, um, the Encounter Human Design, you'll find the video that is him actually sharing it from his perspective. But in the short version, so he walked away from his life. You know, he's an ego manifester, and so he just, you know, has his he's an ego manifester, and so he just has his own trajectory, and so he's just following that, you know. And so literally it was like he was at a store, left the car running because he was just going to go run in and get something, and he's in the store and he is checking out, and he asked the lady, do you have a back door? And she's like, yeah. And so he literally walked out the back door and like walked away from his life, his family, his children, like everything. um and so found himself in Amsterdam, was having a conversation with this person, still doesn't know what his name was. They just had a conversation for about 90 minutes, and he was talking about how he was kind of like, you know, I left my whole life, and so now I'm just, you know, kind of trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do. And so the guy was like, oh, you should go to Ibiza, or you should check out Ibiza. And he was like, what is it? You know, he didn't even know that it was a place. And so
Mhm.
then he was like, oh, you know, it's this island off of Spain. And so he goes there, and he was, you know, like you're right, he was living in a tree for a while. And then and like super like radical type of experience, you know.
Yeah.
Like, um and so but then he got a lodging at this ruina, which is kind of like this hut or this ruin. And so, and there was this dog, this stray dog that was like had kind of adopted him and was following him around. And so he was coming back one night, and the dog is important because it's like the dog also has a design, and the dog, because the dog was with him, it was defining different aspects of his design that he wouldn't have had without the dog. um and so so the dog was with him, and then there was a light under the door, and there's no electricity, so he was like, what's going on, you know, who's in there? And so the dog, I think, went first, or then the dog was like, ooh, like, you know, I'm not going to go in there. He opened the door, and there was this lamp that was lit, and this like extraordinary presence that just caused him to lose all of his body water. Like he was just like, it was as if I had just jumped out of a swimming pool. All of the water in my body just came out, and I was standing, and the water also has a piece to do with it because water also increases electromagnetic connectivity. um, and then there was this voice that sounded like an old woman who'd been smoking for decades. And it was like, are you ready to work? And so it was 8 days of him transcribing what this voice was imparting to him. And it was extraordinarily painful. He actually compares it to being raped for 8 days. um, and that the pain would only go away when he would continue to transcribe what this voice was telling him. And so then, you know, it was not called human design in the beginning, it was called a design of forms. And the form is the physical body. I always love that because
I
even
was
as
gonna say, I feel like it would make it more clear for people.
well, I don't know, I mean, it evolved how it evolved, you know, and it is
Yeah.
what it is now. But um yeah, a design of form sounds, I don't know, a little bit less like, what does that mean? You know? But I do like to bring that up because human design is so vast and can feel kind of complicated, and overwhelming for a lot of people, and like kind of heady, you know, that it's like, well, actually, it's designed to reorient us back to our physical bodies, um,
Mhm.
and for our physical bodies to make the decisions and guide us in our lives instead of our minds.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, so it was, um, you know, it's not, it wasn't some kind of like glorified spiritual experience, you know, that it was like the angels came in, it was like, ah, you know, and it was like, ah. And for me, I feel like he was when I listen to him, you know, I'm like, this is a priest from Atlantis, and he probably did some nefarious things in Atlantis. And so now his retribution is that he has the task that's not exceptionally pleasant to bring forward this system in order to help us to navigate these choice points that we're at, because the choice points that we're at now are very similar to the choice points that we were facing in Atlantis.
Well, yeah, it's like AI, it feels too familiar. You know, our bodies remember, especially those of us who lived in Lemuria, like time after time after time. It's like we're going this way again. Like there's a split off. Are we going to stay with the heart chakra and the organic? Or are we going to get so power hungry that we start with, Pluto and Aquarius? Pluto's the planet of power, and it's, we got power over, power to, or power with. Power over is what's been going on. We see it all day, every day. I mean, Gaza, politics, it's power over. Power to appears to be docile, and it's also like giving your power away. Like power with is like we all have our own power and we stand together, and it's like having a powerful collective is only possible when we're each in our full power. So yeah, I'm so passionate about that because I'm like hold up, we already did this. Like it's it's really important, and I think that human design will help us stay in when we're in our bodies. We're connected to our soul and our essence, and it's like love will win the day if we're there. It's when we get up here, and when the fear, people leave their bodies when they're in fear. And so it's very important. And everything you're sharing, it's almost like you started your process of like real projectorhood. Is that a term? I don't know. Okay. Okay. Yeah. You started yours, I would say like 2 years before me, like the actual living it. Mine was more, I didn't, I don't know if I was super burnt out, but I definitely realized that because my business was exploding, and it was like the music, and it was the breath work and astrology, and the coaching, and I know I'm going to write books, and it was this fork in the road, of course, when Pluto moved and sat on my Saturn for the first time. Still there, by the way. um I was at this, speaking of choice points, I was realizing you got to cut your losses now, or else this is gonna, I could just feel it. I just had this knowing of like, I either break the system now and rebuild it based on my end result, which is like living in full alignment with my energy and who I am, or I keep going and break it later because I know it's not sustainable. I could just see it. And I was starting to realize what I noticed, especially going the first time going back to Chicago in a year. For those of you listening that don't know, I was on Maui, which is also where Rakai'el lives. So we became friends in person. Um, when I was in Chicago, I realized, oh, I think a big reason that I was able to do what I was doing is because I just lived in like a sacral hub. I was like, wow. I was like running down the street. I was really happy because, I just lived there and I was seeing and experiencing a lot of things. And I was just like, I have so much energy. And then like on the drive home, I was like, wait a second. Oh my gosh. That was like the energy. Like I just had all these ahas. Um, but I just wanted to share the weavings. We're both projectors. We're both here to guide. And you said a few things that are important. You said radical change, and you said letting go of things. And that's like previous ways of success. That's literally been so when I say it was a mind fucker, it still sometimes is a mind fuck for me. That is probably an understatement because my mind wants to go to what's the pattern that created the result in the past, and also knowing, hey, that has a ceiling on it because it's not how I'm designed. And so it's like this trust, and then gotta be relentless with it, like hold the line to first of all actually know if it even works. Because how would you know if you're dabbling? And then second, you know, if you want to, what do they say? If you want to live in the castle, you got to swim the moat.
I've never heard that, but that makes sense.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you're talking about that, you went back to Chicago and you were like, oh, I have all this energy. It's actually, um, and different people have different levels of aura sensitivity. Um, I have the channel of synthesis, which is a design of sensitivity. So I'm very, very sensitive. Um, and because technically it's kind of like, that if there's someone in another room or like, the apartment next to you or something, that your auric hygiene, that it's like they're not influencing you. But I feel like for me, even on Zoom, it's like, people are like, oh, I can't feel like, it's like, oh, it's like, it doesn't matter until you're like in aura with someone. And I'm like, man, when I have sessions with manifesting generators or generators, it's like when I have sessions with sacral beings, it's like, oh man, do I have energy after that? But then like, I'm like, okay, now it's time to lay down.
Literally
Draining
feel
out.
high. I feel high.
Mhm. Yeah. And so, the modern society would be like, "Oh, I can be productive," And the whole like, "Oh my gosh," like, productivity is like modern slavery basically. You know? But that was what happened was that I was living above a manifesting generator. Um, and and my bedroom was like right above. She had a studio, and then I had a two bedroom, but my bedroom was right above her studio. And then when I moved out of that place, and then I moved into a single dwelling, where it was like that was the only I was the only house on the property. And that was the very first time. I mean, I still was in aura with my cat, but that was the very first time that I was like, wow, there's no, footsteps of another person or sounds, it was like, oh, wow, this is very, and that was really when it was like, like I was the true exhaustion was able to finally get me because I wasn't still amplifying the sacral energy of my neighbor. And she's an amazing person, by the way. We're very good friends, but it's still that, sacral addiction for projectors. It's a very real thing.
Oh yeah. So when I was first, basically what happened in my journey was I mean, I never ever worked for anybody really. I'm not employable. I'm just like, I'm doing my own thing. Like, I'm going to build shit that matters, that, do it on my terms. And so I was technically off the grid, but I was still just like, I was seeing, like 4 clients a day and going to them in person, and which I had a lot of fun, and I made a big impact in a lot of kids' lives, and which was massive. Um and the whole premise was like, just learn the way you learn, be who you are, and keep your voice. Like, you don't have to lose it like I did. Um I decided, okay, I'm going to take one day, I'm going to delete one day of piano clients from my schedule. That was like the beginning of my experiment. And when I tell you that I felt a come down, it was the same as when I stopped doing cocaine like a decade ago. I was like, I'm depressed. I was like, what's wrong? Like, and it was literally one day a week. And so that was a big process on Maui as well, because I was like, yeah, it's just the deconditioning is real for projectors, and I would say for everyone, right? Because all people, the system benefits from homogenization. I drove by a school the other day and I just looked at it, and the first thing I thought was that it looks like a prison. It looks like a prison where they program good employees. And then my next thought, I was like, I'm gonna make a school. Like, but how would you suggest because people are listening and they're not all projectors. A lot of them, I call in a lot of projectors, but a lot of sacral beings as well. Like, especially a lot of sacral beings with Gemini placements, because of everything we do with breath work. It's like I'm always calling it, it's like Gemini or Libra. It's like textbook. It's amazing. How would you suggest people engage with this from a place of empowerment? Because a lot of people, I think, just because the way we're designed, we can take in a lot of information and it's like very, very exciting. And then a lot of people will have a lot of this and it feels overwhelming, like, oh, it's one more thing to like be good at or that. So how would you guide them on engaging with this from an empowering lens?
For human design specifically?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
throw in your mirror too.
Um, well, I mean, for all different types of beings learn in different types of ways. Um, and and it's really unique depending on your type, It's like um projectors are different in that it's like we come to human design with the illusion that we're going to learn about ourselves. Like, I need to figure out how I work. I need to understand myself better. And that's just the dangling carrot because we've been programmed to be generators, or manifesting generators. We've been programmed to be sacral beings who are designed to know themselves.
Mhm.
And it was even true for me, like, in the beginning where it was like, you see these posts on Instagram that it's like, okay, like, 5 tips for, generators or manifesting generators, projectors, manifestors, reflectors, whatever. Or they go through the profiles, it's like if you're a 1-4 or a 4-1, or like whatever. And I would be like, yeah, 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 whatever. Like, come on, get to mine, get to mine, like I'm not really interested in all of these other ones. Um, and that's because it was still, in the illusion that I could know about myself. So the only people who are really designed to actually learn the system is projectors. And so
Mm.
everybody else can just be like, "Ah,"
I love that. Thank you for that.
if you want to, right? That doesn't mean that, if you're a manifester or a reflector or a sacral being that, and you want to learn the system, that that's wrong. No, it's like, follow what feels, empowering for you. But really, it's like, so sacral beings, manifestors and sorry, manifesting generators and generators are designed to know themselves. And that's really that if you can get that, then you're aces. So it doesn't have to feel like, oh my gosh, and it's like you can take it step by step. It's like just knowing your type, if you're a manifesting generator or a generator, projector, reflector, manifestor, whatever, and knowing your strategy, right?
Mhm.
So projectors are designed to wait for the invitation, manifestors are designed to inform, sacral beings designed to respond, such and such and such. And um, so to know your strategy, and like even, I was just watching this thing the other day of Rod. He was just talking about like, if though I only taught someone their strategy, he doesn't even talk about authority. He's like, if I only taught them how to be able to navigate their life according to their strategy, so much of their life, and they were committed to doing that, like that's the other part, it's like, you have to like, for me, it's like, my mom was like, oh, you have to wait for the invitation. I was like, ha, no.
Yeah, that's how I was. I said fuck human design. I was like, I don't believe in that. I was
Right.
like, that's not look at my life. I'm doing pretty great and I didn't wait for anything. LOL.
Yeah. Yeah. um so But then when you bring in your authority, right? It's like because we think that we're all designed to make decisions in the same way, that that it's like if someone asks you if you want to do something that you're supposed to respond right away with whether you're like So number one, everyone does not have a response. Like, you and I actually do not have we do not have a response. And not everyone is going to be able to, even people who do have a response, they're not going to be able to know if they want to do something or not in the moment, right? Because you can be a sacral being, so you can have sacral definition, you can have a response mechanism inside of your body, but you may have emotional authority. And so, the emotions are creating so many more chemicals that override that in the moment response. And so making in the moment decisions is not helpful for 50% of the population. So really that is kind of like, you don't have to learn your variables. You don't have to learn about the arrows or the color or the tone or the base. You don't have to learn your dream chart, right? It's like you don't have to know your sense or your motivation. It's like you don't have to know any of that. Is
Mhm.
like, but if you want to have a better life, than
Mhm.
than what society or the status quo has offered you. If you feel frustrated, if you feel angry, if you feel bitter, resentful, if you feel disappointed, um, on any kind of consistent basis, and this also we have to be honest with ourselves because we're also, especially in America,
Yeah.
right? You're supposed to be smiling and happy, and if you're not, something's wrong with you. And so we try to force that smiling happiness.
Mhm.
Uh, and so, but if you just like, that's the simplest thing, is that if you just follow your strategy and your authority, even if it's just your strategy, then
Mhm.
it's like your life can be so much more peaceful, so much more satisfying. You can have so much more success. You can have so much more surprise and delight in your life. Um, and you can experience so much less resistance. So you don't have to go all in by any means.
Mhm. Choose your own adventure.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I love how this is just leading into it naturally, but one of the topics I really wanted to tease out some of your wisdom about is emotionality, because I was shocked to my core when I realized that half the population has emotional authority. And it honestly made me a little bit concerned about where we're going as a collective, because if 50% of people are designed to have an emotional wave, like, that impacts everyone. Like, I don't have an emotional wave, you do though. And so knowing, like, the fact that I know you have an emotional wave, like, I'm in relationship with you differently. So I would love to hear you speak into that, because no matter who's listening to this, I think it's really, really, it's almost like, I don't know, if I was in charge of Earth School, which I know I'm not, I would make it like required reading, like make sure you read about the emotional wave, because it doesn't matter whether you have it or not. You gotta at least have, from my perspective today, like have a understanding of what it means, so you can love yourself and love the people around you, and understand it. So yeah, hit us with your wisdom.
Totally. Oh my gosh. Like, I mean, it makes me so happy that you say that, you being a non-emotional being, um, for you to say like, "Oh, I wish that this was like, foundational course instruction for, it's like we should learn to meditate and we should learn about the the emotional solar plexus." You know, like instead of learning the Pledge of Allegiance or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, so, um, so just first of all, like vernacular and like language. So when we're saying emotional beings, when we're saying emotional authority, when we're saying the solar plexus, what we're talking about is when you look at a human design chart and you have those 9 energy centers, it's the inward pointing triangle on the right hand side. And so there's a lot of different apps out there that, websites. I recommend Jovian Archive. That is the foundation website from Ra. He put that together. If you want to look at an app, I recommend the app that is called Human Design App. It's not My Human Design, it's Human Design App. Um, and it's free. You can look at your chart and you just put in your birth information, and you can find out, what your authority is. So if you have that center, that on the right hand side, that one that's pointing inwards on the lowermost right hand side, if it's brown or colored in any color, whatever website you're looking at, then you are an emotional being. You have solar plexus definition, and that is your emotional solar plexus. Um, and so if you don't have that, like, so that's how my chart looks. And then for you, for your chart, you have it white, right? So it's not filled in. So if it's not filled in, then the language, how you would hear it spoken about is that you are a non-emotional being. So
Mhm.
now this does not mean that you don't have emotions.
Oh, I cried this morning.
Totally, right? It's like, no, it's the opposite from what it sounds like. Um, but just that we may use that language, and so that just you know what we're talking about. Um, so if you don't have solar plexus definition and you are a non-emotional being, you are amplifying times 200% the emotional wave that whoever you're interacting with who does have that same center defined, filled in, colored in, same. Um, and they could actually appear to be calm, right? That's the thing, is that the person, the emotional being who has solar plexus definition could outwardly appear to be calm. But if you do not have solar plexus definition, you're a non-emotional being and you're with that person, especially if you're in aura, and especially if they're a projector, right? Because if you have an emotional projector, they're putting their energy into you, they're penetrating you with their energy.
Mhm.
And so if they have that defined and you don't, you're going to be amplifying that. So a lot of times, non-emotional beings have bigger emotional experiences than emotionally defined people. And that's a whole, thing you could get into, where it's like, it's actually very healthy, for emotionally defined people to make themselves cry, to elicit emotion, to watch sad movies or listen to sad songs to provoke that emotion from within them. I did a wonderful, wonderful training with Brayton Balazzo for the Emotional Authority. Highly, highly recommend him for studying emotional authority. Um, but where we're going, right? Because we all can tell that times are changing. Whether you know about any esoteric systems or not. Like that much is apparent. And time, people, so someone posted the other day, they were like, in 6 months, 2020 is going to be 5 years ago. It's like, right? What is time? What is time these days? Um, and so the time frequency that we've been in comes from the center that's exactly on the opposite side. It comes from the spleen. So the spleen faces inwards on the left-hand side at the bottom, and the solar plexus faces inwards at the bottom on the right-hand side. So we're living in splenic time right now, or it's starting to change. But splenic time is in the moment. Every answer is yes, unless you hear that whisper of a no. And so splenic people are always early. They move very quickly. They can make in the moment spontaneous decisions. And so that's the time frequency that we've been living in. And so where we're headed is towards we're going to experience this mutation related to the emotional solar plexus, and it's already kind of starting, and it's going to become more amplified in 2027, and after that very much more pronounced. And so that time frequency is, the opposite of splenic time. And so for the solar plexus, the answer to every question is always no first.
Mhm.
And so and then you have to wait in your wave, and there's different types of waves. So the wave can move differently depending on how you're emotionally defined. But you have to wait. Someone says, "Do you want to go to the movie on Friday?" And you're like, "I don't know." Let me feel into that. Let me sit with it. Um, and a lot of times, even for our, time for today, it was like, I woke up and I was like, oof. I was like, and I don't know why. That's also a super important thing for beings who have emotional definition, is that sometimes we can feel lethargic, or we can feel kind of like low energy or even depressed, because our solar plexus is processing so much emotional current and we don't know why. I was like, I don't know, like I felt really great yesterday. I went to bed at a nice hour. Like, I should feel good today, but it was like, woof. And so I was like, can we push back? And even it was like, okay, we're supposed to start at this time. And then I was like, not ready yet. Nope. And so it was like, and I appreciate your patience, to wait for when I feel good. Because that that is the time frequency that we are all moving towards, is this emotional timing
Mhm.
I'm trying not to get too deep into this,
Yeah.
but it's like if you have emotional definition, basically when you're doing your deconditioning and you recognize the power and the influence that your emotional definition has on the beings in your life who do not have emotional definition, that you are responsible for setting the emotional tonality of any interaction. And
Mhm.
so when you think that you need to arrive on time or at a certain, you need to do something based on someone else's expectations of you that doesn't actually feel good to you. This is for the emotional person. And you come into that meeting or that, friend hangout or that class or that session or whatever with any kind of crunchy emotional currency running through your being. Everybody who does not have emotional definition is going to feel that, and they are going to amplify that. And so it really is that, with great power comes great responsibility, and for you, right? You and the other 50% of the people of the population who do not have emotional definition, it's to, because you can be really wise about, because you have that extreme sensitivity to the emotional current that's running through the other people who do have emotional definition, you can become very wise about the beings in your life who are healthy emotional beings. And so then you're not going to press them, right? You're not going to say like, why weren't you there, blah blah, like, whatever. It's like to give them the space and that to be in their emotional timing so that they can bring the good emotional energy.
Yeah, I think I love that explanation, and it just is just important, you know? If we want to have a better world, then people got to feel better. And this is like the day-to-day nuance of, I would say, first step, figure out if you are emotional or non-emotional. And then from there, you're gonna have a lens, because my lens is like, I don't know what it's, I know what it's like to feel someone's wave. I don't know what it's like to have a wave. So I really view my job as like, because I know it's like, it depends on the person, but you're really leaving, you're like really unhooking from a lot of conditioning if you actually live your wave and and respect your wave. And so I just I want to create so much like safety and nurturing and like celebration around my wave people, because I'm like, yes, surf your wave, like take your time. I'll be here. Like I'm not going anywhere, because I think that's so important too with everything you shared about when you decide to radically become yourself, like things do fall away, and that's part of it. But if you're someone who mm, wants to love the people for who they are, then I think it's important to just consistently celebrate that, because it's not easy.
Mm-mm. No, I mean, like I received so much flack my whole life, because it was just like, I was like, why can't I be on time? Like, what is wrong with me? And I tried to make a joke about it. It was like I had this sticker when I was in college that said always late but worth the wait, It was
You
like,
should bring that one back.
or like when in The Lord of the Rings, when Gandalf is like, Mr. Frodo, a wizard is neither ever early or is never late, but he arrives exactly when he means to. And I was like, I'm a wizard.
Yes.
But it's like I've lost clients for it, who are like, I feel like you're not respecting my time. And, they had signed up to work with me and they were like, I don't think this is going to work because I feel like you disrespected my time because you were running late for our session. And if I was a priority, then you would be here on time. And I've had friends who've, pressed me into that. And they're like, it's super disrespectful. And I'm like, actually, especially to the people who do not have emotional definition, me taking my time and not coming to that, whatever it is, on time because I respect them and I don't want to bring any kind of like weird, crunchy, funky emotional energy for them to amplify, that is the most respectful thing that I can do.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, just, to, lose people in your life who are just like, that seems really selfish. I don't know how you can, run a business like that. And, it's just like, well, I'm just being myself and I can't do anything else. And if you don't support that, then that's okay.
Yeah.
Because it's a big world, there's a lot of people, and we'll find the people. The more and more that we become ourselves, and the more that we are magnetized to the people who can be okay with us being ourselves.
Yeah. And the word selfish, I mean, we could do a whole podcast about that word.
Totally.
Well, this has been so beautiful and so many golden nuggets. I just thank you for being here and sharing your light with us. There is one question I always like to end with because it's just fun and I love hearing what comes out and I'm excited to hear from you. The whole point of this podcast is it's a place to heal, learn, grow, connect, all in the service of a better world, right? So, what is your definition of a better world?
Hmm. My definition of a better world is where everyone has the courage to be themselves and to also have the patience and the acceptance for everyone else in their lives to be themselves. And because it's like I've talked about this in many different ways over the years, that it's that we have this idea, and I think, the South Node in Libra and Pluto in Aquarius is helping to shift this, as in addition to the mutation of 2027. But and I'll be really curious to see what it's like when we go into the South Node goes into Virgo.
Oh.
Because that's going to be purging all of our negative self-talk and all of our criticisms and, not good enoughness and all of that. Um,
And hitting all my planets.
totally. Oh. Um, but we have this idea that we want unity consciousness and we want everyone to get along, and honestly, it's kind of like I don't think that we can really understand. I don't think we have the patience or the forgiveness
Mm,
to really to really allow unity consciousness to authentically become a reality, because I feel like that our current perception of what we think of as unity consciousness is that somehow all of our differences dissolve and we're all at peace and we're all at harmony with one another. But it's like when you get down into like what is real unity consciousness, it has to come through first at the radical acceptance of everyone else's in your life, their individuality,
Mhm.
where it's like, like one of my students the other day was like, how can this work like in a family? It's like I have a non-emotional son. I'm an emotional being. I don't always feel like, taking him places or doing things, with him or for him, it's like just being very, very honest. And she's like, what am I supposed to do? Like I'm being not self by, and my son is amplifying that, it's like this whole kind of spiral of like, you know, or people who, we think about, our food system, right? We have all these people who drive these trucks or who fly these planes, and they wake up in the morning and they have to get in that cab and drive across the country. And if 50% of them are emotional, you couldn't guarantee 50% of them do not feel like doing that day.
Mhm.
So what is going to happen when everyone actually, how can we become so open-hearted
Mhm.
that we can actually be at peace with everyone being their true selves? And
Mhm.
so that's the real better world that,
Mhm.
I hope for, is that, for our creativity to expand to that place of, how can we, instead of like, I don't really care about going to Mars, right? It's like, let's use our innovation and our creativity while we still have it,
Yeah.
that in order to, design systems and build, things that can support people in truly being themselves.
Mhm.
Um, and not having to sacrifice the individual for the success of the tribe or the collective.
Yes. 1,000 times yes. Well, it's coming to that, when I drove by the school the other day, and I just felt like this is like a prison, it's like a training ground for people to not be who they are.
Mhm. I
Uh,
mean, you even think about, sorry, you even think about the cafeteria at school, right? It's like in human design, we have 12 different types of determinations, like 12 different ways in which people digest food and digest information. And so like a school where they're learning, and also a cafeteria where they're eating, it's like, you need to have the room where it's like, okay, this is the room where people just eat in quiet and there's no talking, and this is the room where there's lots of nervous energy and there's lots of things that are happening and people can die. And then there's this room that has no talking but only this air conditioner sound, and this other sound where there's lots of loud music playing, or like people have to sit under direct light, or they have to like sit
um,
indoor, or they're going to only eat at nighttime. They're not actually going to eat at school, or they only eating one thing at a time. It's like,
yeah, when you I loved your answer because it really, what you did is you shared your heart and you put it through the lens of, hey, this is where we're at right now, Here's the gap. Here's the, what are we going to fill this with? And it does take our innovation, which is like the Atlantean. And then the other part is what you're sharing is the heart, the Lemurian, this like what is unconditional love? It's unconditional. You don't have to change who you are. That's what real unconditional love is. And
Mhm.
it's really unhooking from, whatever we've been a part of up till now. I don't know what it's called.
Matrix,
Matrix.
Maya, the program. Yeah.
Aw. Well, I could talk to you for hours. Thank you so much for sharing. And wow, like I received so much in this, and I know that everybody listening is going to receive so much. How can people connect with you? Like, if they want to have a session, if they want to learn more from you, like, how can they do that?
Well, I'm on my website is my name, Rakai'el.com, Rakaiel.com. And on Instagram, my Instagram handle is I am Rakai'el. And those are the two. We keep it simple. I have a YouTube channel, but it's not super active, so maybe that'll be something else that happens. But those are the two best places for now.
Cool. And I've sat in session with her. I've been in her classes. I've been in her world for years. Highly, highly recommend. Um, Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Adrienne. And thank you for your 2343 for structuring our conversation in a beautiful, empowering way. I feel like that was a nice flow and a nice synergy. And thank you so much to everyone for listening. We hope that this was helpful and inspiring, empowering, and supportive for you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody listening. Go out there, be the change, be the light, be the real you. Go make a stranger smile because that's what we do here. And it charges the whole field. And I will see you next time on A Better World with Adrienne.